This week, Hank Thomas from Strategic Cyber Ventures is with us to discuss the state of the security market. Then Jackie McGuire from Cribl joins us to talk about curbing data chaos. Finally, in the enterprise security news, more funding for securing AI, funding for K-12 cyber education, Palo Alto Networks acquires Dig Security, Proofpoint picks up Tessian, ORNL, Oak Ridge National Labs, creates Kaiser, a center for AI security research. Cloudflare creates a tool out of spite. CISA creates a tool out of benevolence. Biden's executive order on trustworthy AI. Annual pen test stats from NetSpy. 5 lessons learned from Okta's recent breach. Should ransom payments be illegal? All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Cyber threats target digital identities. Do you know who or what is accessing your company's apps, systems, and data? You need to know who's there, who to let in, and who to keep out. And you'll need more than access management to stay secure. You need SailPoint Identity Security. As the leader in identity security, SailPoint can help mature your security resilience while driving efficiencies and compliance for your organization. Start your identity journey with SailPoint's free maturity assessment. Go to securityweekly.com/SailPoint to get your free identity security assessment today. If you work in security or IT and your company has Okta, this message is for you. Imagine a world where only secure devices can access your cloud apps. In this world, phish credentials are useless to attackers, and you can manage every OS, even Linux, from a single dashboard. Best of all, you can get employees to fix their own device security issues without creating more work for IT. The good news is, you don't have to imagine this world. You can just start using Collide. Visit securityweekly.com/Collide to watch a demo today. That's securityweekly.com/KOLIDE. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Men Make Dinner Day. This is episode 338, recorded on Thursday, November 2nd, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Baron of Bloodhound, the Pirate King of PowerShell, the, I don't know a V word for vacations, Sean Metcalf. How are you, Sean?
Doing good, thank you.
We missed you.
I wish it was vacation. Thank you, I missed you too. It's been too long for sure. It's been my busy season in travel for conferences and going around spreading the good word of Active Directory security and Azure AD security, Entra ID security, and talking with a lot of folks across the country about different things. And apparently today is also Cook for Your Pets Day and Fried Clams Day.
Wow, so men are cooking for their pets and they're making clams is what I'm getting. If we combine all of them together.
I would not recommend feeding the pets fried clams, but who knows. And I believe tomorrow is National Godzilla Day, which I think is
wow. Cool. What would you cook for National Godzilla Day?
I don't know. Fish?
Very large steaks. I don't know. But yeah, actually, it's kind of funny that just happened to be a national day today. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy national days, but it had just been brought to my attention that there was a study that worldwide women cook twice as much as men, except for Italy. Men cook more than women in only one country, and that country is Italy.
It's a lot of pasta.
I guess that makes sense. They don't all. I think that's kind of a regional thing there. Like there's areas where they don't eat all that much pasta. But I would love to go sometime. Actually, I am going to Italy in December.
How about that? Nice segue. I've been. It's beautiful.
Yeah, we're gonna Milan, Florence area. So entirely new to me.
That's
that
wonderful.
Should be interesting.
Love it.
I grew up cooking Italian, actually, in nice Italian restaurants. So I know my way around the food, but never been to the country.
Yeah, definitely get some pesto to bring home with you. That's my recommendation.
Oh, yeah? Okay. I love pesto. Pesto's great. Yeah, and also I wanted to note that on what was the name? National Men Make Dinner Day. I'm going to make some additional rules. So the grill counts, but pouring cereal and opening Pop-Tart packages does not count as cooking. So it has to count as cooking.
I think that's fair.
All right, quick announcement here. Join us for one of our Identiverse regional events coming up on December 1st in New York City and December 5th in Chicago. Participate alongside local experts and regional peers in information-rich sessions on the latest technologies, best practices, and industry trends. Secure your complimentary registration at securityweekly.com/IDV Regional Events 2023. All right, for the first interview today, we are talking about the state of funding in the security market. We're excited to have Hank Thomas, founder of Strategic Cyber Ventures, with us today. Hank Thomas is a Washington, D.C. based venture capital investor, founder and CEO of Strategic Cyber Ventures. And SCV, which we will refer to it after this so we don't have to say Strategic Cyber Ventures. SCV invests in rapidly growing cybersecurity and privacy-focused technology companies. Welcome, Hank.
Thanks. We hope they're rapidly growing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's a legit question in this market, right? Which is one of the things that we want to talk about here. It just kind of grew out of when I took over the podcast. I think when Paul Asadorian ran this podcast before I took it over, somewhere around episode 200 or so, there was some funding and acquisition stuff, but because I was an ex-analyst and I've always followed the market closely and been very interested in it, and we also had Tyler Shields here, and then later on added Katie Teitler as a co-host, we got very into the market. And so in the news segments, if you've ever heard one of our news segments, we typically cover all the major fundings, all the big acquisitions, and talk about market trends. So that naturally led to us having VCs on for us to chat with about the state of the market.
Excellent. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I didn't, our guests usually have a much longer bio posted on the show page with the show notes than anything that I read out. But one thing jumped out at me. I noticed you serve on the Consumer Electronics Show Advisory Board. How did that come about?
We had a marketing team at one point. I think they were working directly for us, and they had a relationship with the Consumer Technology Association. And I just started talking with them about, why security wasn't a bigger part of Consumer Electronics Show. And I think it just generated enough. I think I was annoying enough that they said, "Do you want to be on our advisory board and find panelists to come sit on panels and do security stuff in some far back corner of the room while we're showing off the new electric car?" And that's what I do now. I've been doing that for, I guess, 6 years now, helping build a growing cadre of security content within the broader Consumer Electronics Show ecosystem. Had a bit of a setback during COVID, but the show's totally coming back now. It's I think this year they're going to be back to near full strength.
Yeah, I've heard it's madness. It's an enormous show, and I think gaming used to be a much bigger part of it until they kind of separated out into different shows, into E3, I think it was. Yeah,
gaming's still a part of it, but there's a lot. I mean, it's almost, I think it's the world's largest car show now. So there's just tons of that.
Wow. Really? Yeah, I guess that makes sense. With cars are more gadgets and, IoT devices than mechanical devices anymore.
That's right. I find it to be one of the better security conferences in the sense that you have, you can walk around the show and essentially look at the attack surface and then come back in and talk about security because it's all right there.
Absolutely. I mean, almost everything at CES is going to be smart, have the word smart in it, or be internet connected in some way. So I'm sure that's a IoT security playground there. And mentioning the cars, I remember I've seen like it turned into a fashion for companies that don't make cars to display a car there. Like Sony, for a couple of years now, has displayed a car at CES, even though they don't seem to have any intent in making them.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's just kind of keeping people thinking, maybe it's good branding, I guess. There's, we've got flying cars there now. We've got, it's last year, I think the most exciting thing I did there.
Finally, yes, flying cars.
Yes. It did not take me anywhere. But I did ride in a AI, roller coaster that had real fans that like blew in my face. Virtual reality, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's probably AI mixed in there too, but it felt like a real roller coaster. It was the best roller coaster I've been on that didn't go anywhere.
Well, I that's a bucket list item. I've got to score a ticket to CES some year.
All right. Well, let me know. I might be able to hook you up.
All right. That sounds good. It's usually in January, isn't it? Early in the year?
January. Yeah. It's the second week of January this year.
Wow. Okay. I'll be in touch.
Okay.
All right. So, So let's. I think my first question. We kind of need to level set a little bit. If somebody's coming into this discussion cold, we saw a market downturn that I think really hit mid 2021, if I recall. I think it was around June 2021 that we saw our last cybersecurity unicorn until like a week ago, right? And what was it? Who was it last week we saw that became a unicorn? I'm blanking on that.
Yeah. It'll come to me in a minute.
Oh,
it'll come to me. It escaped my head.
Yeah, I'm literally looking at the show notes from last week, and it's Island.
Right, that's
Island.
right.
Yeah. So and that's when the layoffs started. Also, like maybe a couple months before the unicorns ended that year. Our show, we had a whole graph kind of overlapping the two, showing when the unicorn stopped and the layoffs started. And now, are we seeing some indications that things are coming back, that they're going back to normalcy? Because for a while, when we'd have VCs and finance folks on or investors on, the question was, how long are things going to be like this? How long before it comes back? And obviously, it's not going to come back in a big rush. It's going to be more of a gradual thing. But are we starting to see signs that show that it is going back to normalcy? Are we seeing more investments than we were, or is there going to be? Do you think there's going to be some permanent impact of this downturn? And we're not going to go back to crazy free money where we're seeing 5-6 unicorns a month.
I think there's a lot of mixed signals right now. I think that I don't think we're going back to where we were in any time soon. Let's say the next 3 to 5 years. I think we're still on a trend of increasing consolidation. I'm seeing that. I know this for a fact. There are a lot of companies that are running out of money, and they're going to need to either reset expectations for their next round of venture funding or find a new home for the company. So I think once we get through sort of that culling of, let's say, the kind of the bottom of the barrel, companies that maybe brought on too much capital and don't have enough revenue. It's kind of as simple as that. And they find a new home, they get bolted on somewhere else. I think you're going to see probably the next wave of like over the horizon security investment begin to take place. I don't see I haven't really seen an uptick in venture investing. I think we're still doing a lot of investing ourselves. We're seeing a lot of deals that we wouldn't have seen in the past, being a relatively small firm, East Coast firm, that, our volume of opportunities, our pipeline is really high right now, just because there's just a lot of people not deploying capital.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, so, I mean, Sean, your company's bootstrapped, right? Like I imagine, that this isn't just about whether or not you're able to raise and controlling burn, but also weren't people buying less in the last year? Weren't enterprise kind of pulling back? Like I've heard a lot about not necessarily budgets being slashed, but a lot more due diligence on spending, especially on products.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly what I've seen is this kind of wait and see approach, and I'll pivot and ask Hank about this as well to see what he's seen. But certainly there seems to be this big kind of, everyone's not sure what's been going on in 2023. So they're all like, well, we're going to hold back and not spend some money on some things that we used to spend money on, or maybe we have budget that we want to just wait and see, not be the ones that spend this money and see what others do. It's been this very weird year of, I'm not sure what's going on. You're not sure what's going on. So let's just hold off on really doing some of the things that, even if we've done them before, certainly companies are still buying and getting pen tests. These are often required through regulatory purposes and reasons. For the broader kind of security assessments, things like that, pipeline has been slower. Deals have taken longer. Certainly at Trimark, we have a lot of great customers that continue to reach out and continue to keep our pipeline pretty full. But we have heard from others that are experiencing challenges, especially on the product side. Companies seem to be a little bit more reticent to certainly investing in potentially new products that could help them. But I would like to kick the question over to Hank to see what he's seen from the perspective of the money and what's been done with money from companies into product companies that are looking for those ARRs and things like that to continue. And then I have another question.
Yeah, no, I mean, justifying your existence is becoming a much bigger part of your job. So you have a customer, let's say it's a Fortune 500 CISO. They have 150 security widgets in their portfolio products. And you're one of those. There is a concerted drill going on across enterprise security leadership where they're saying, okay, we have some overlap. We could afford to have overlap in the past. We could afford to have redundancy. Redundancy was good. It's a part of a sort of a defense in depth, but our budgets aren't what they used to be, and we need to go through and evaluate what we have, and if there's redundancy there, dive a little bit deeper and figure out exactly, why we have certain things. That there was a rush to kind of buy everything, especially if you had kind of unlimited budgets in security, just to kind of check all those blocks. But that's changing, and then so that's with existing customers. Let's say you're a new startup trying to get your first few customers. The same thing applies. You're really having to not only prove your value to the enterprise security stack, but also prove that you're going to be around in a few years, because you may have only raised a couple $1 million and people understand the current state of the venture ecosystem.
Okay, and I'll ask my follow-up question. So apparently WeWork is going to be filing for bankruptcy next week, at least that's the rumor. And companies like Uber, Airbnb, and Snap continue to burn cash. Do you think we're seeing the end of this growth above everything else approach, or do you think we're still going to see some of that, or are the revenue numbers and certainly annual recurring revenue numbers going to be more important and something that investors such as yourself will be looking at a little more closely?
I think in certain cases, the growth above anything else part is going to be in AI. You're going to see that for a while. AI is the new place to find those metrics to be the most important. But outside of just a few categories, and I would say in security, revenue is more important than ever. It really is. I mean, just getting to past proof of concept to actually proof of revenue is a real thing. And sticky revenue too, like quality customers that are going to be around, that are, in the form of ARR, but also just logos that prove your value. If you land Apple as a customer, you probably are doing something right, and it probably will apply to other places. And those are the kind of things that I know that we're looking for, and I see other investors doing the same.
Yeah, and I get talking about other investors and how how we're seeing some things change here. I think you're the second investor we've had on in a row that kind of takes a different approach to how you can manage investments and how you deploy capital. When we had Chad Cardenas on, was it last week or week before last week? Basically the model there is, hey, we're looking at doing an investment in this company, who's in? They have this syndicate of investors, and it's almost like more like a Kickstarter than a bunch of LPs, raising a bunch of money from an LPs, having this huge lump of money that you then need to figure out, okay, how are we going to slice this pie, and we got to get this capital deployed within 18 months. So do you think, this past market downturn, especially like we've seen cases with SPACs where the money was just returned, right? Like the SPAC was never deployed. They never did anything with it, because there's a timer on it. Once you hit that timer and you haven't deployed it, it goes back into the fund. Do you think that'll change how VCs are set up? Are we going to see more of these kind of non-traditional approaches to deploying capital and raising it?
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. And I'm very, that sort of old school VC approach, first of all, raising capital, if you're a traditional VC fund, is a lot harder now. So you're going to kind of have to think about the model differently, because you may not be able to, if you don't have a lot of a track record, you may not be able to raise it all. We've always been set up differently, and I think it puts us in a unique position right now. We're essentially a single LP fund. I'm seeing more people talking about using the model that we have, or the syndicate model that you were just talking about. So having this pool of people that you can kind of tap into whenever, and doing sort of a round robin pitch and pulling the capital together just in time, or a model like ours where you have one large investor who has access to a large amount of capital. They do a lot of other things besides VC, but they also have a VC outpost for giving them exposure to early stage tech, and in our case, cybersecurity. And that's the way we're set up. We have a couple of small LPs, but we have one large LP, which is a $20 billion hedge fund. And we're our own entity, but they're a part of our investment committee. So we go to them and we draw down capital, and our cap table kind of changes every time we deploy more capital. And I think you're going to see more of that, especially as there's less money. There's just less money out there now. So you're not going to have as many VCs and these mega funds, and starting a VC firm right now is kind of like next to impossible, unless you're just some amazing entrepreneur that has an amazing track record.
Yeah. And one of the challenges we've seen is, with a big market change like this, are valuations. We've seen all kinds of creative announcements where nobody wants to announce a down round. So instead of a Series D, it's a venture round, just a generic, no letter attached to it, or it's an extension to the previous round, or we've even seen like an A2, like a B, like you get, it's a second A round or something like that. So, but with the valuations, there's one really notable unicorn in particular that we had talked about on the prep call, where they went from an order of magnitude down in terms of what their valuation was. How is that affecting the market at this point? Because it seemed like for a while, we thought it was going to be a buyer's market, and we were going to see a huge flood of compromised exits. But it seems like not everybody is ready to accept the fact that their valuation is much less than what they were told it was in 2021. How is that kind of impacting the market? I mean, especially since IPO doesn't look like a reasonable exit for most companies, even cybersecurity unicorns at this point. So, acquisition, maybe PE isn't going to be a great exit for most companies, but what options are out there for some of these companies that aren't going to raise more money and need some kind of exit?
I think so. You described, I think, the most likely course of action for most of these companies is going to be not necessarily a down round, but flat rounds with sort of hidden terms behind them that are very investor friendly for companies that are having a hard time raising money. SPACs aren't really an option anymore. There are still a few floating around out there, but the track record is absolutely abysmal for companies that have successfully de-SPACed. Especially look at some of the cybersecurity companies that went via SPAC. And I look, I'm very familiar with that. I had a SPAC. We created a SPAC to roll up with the thesis of rolling up cybersecurity companies with one anchor and then maybe like 3 supporting cast of characters. I think for a while it was a really good idea until everybody on Earth started a SPAC, and there was just too much money out there, and there was it was a race to the bottom. There was if you wanted to do due diligence on a company, it was viewed as a negative. So we folded our SPAC and gave everybody their money back just because we didn't want to play in that world, and it wasn't going to create the kind of security solution we were hoping to create. And then the third, the acquisition part, I think that a mental debate here as to whether there's going to be more flat VC and down VC rounds than there are going to be acquisitions. I think we've been talking about the acquisition thing for a couple of years, that the M&A market was really going to heat up. I think you're going to see it happen next year. I really do. 2024, you're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see a lot of these sort of zombie cybersecurity companies either acqui-hire or bolt on in some other way. Because honestly, there's still a lot of cool companies out there. They just unfortunately raise too much money at really high valuations.
Yeah, and just for the audience, SPAC, special purpose acquisition company, and Hank, correct me on anything here if I describe this badly, but the general idea is instead of going through a lengthy IPO process where you have to file an S-1, everybody gets to look at your financials, look at your books. It's more of like a blind investment, just based on who that's behind the SPAC, and then when the company goes public, that's when the investors find out what they invested in. So the SPAC company might be called, Blueberries and Apples or something like that. And then you find out it's ZeroFox. I forget the name of the SPAC vehicle that was used to bring, because ZeroFox went public via SPAC. But is that not doing the S1? Is that like the primary attraction of doing that, like fast tracking?
The SPAC, the founder team for SPAC, they raise all the capital, they put the framework in place. It's essentially a shell that a private company reverse merges into. So you're reverse merging it into the SPAC, and then you de-SPAC, and the SPAC, that's when the trading starts. That's when it's listed on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. So you can, at the moment that if you're an investor in a SPAC, at the moment that the company picks a company, say ZeroFox is your example, or whatever company, whatever company they pick, the moment that company is chosen, you can actually choose to get out of the investment before it goes public. That's an option to a SPAC. Which is one of the problems with most of these SPACs is people saw the company and they saw the books they saw the financials, and they were like, oh no, I want out. Yeah. So these SPACs were left with almost no money in their blind pool of trust. So let's say you raise $200 million, you're the SPAC founder team, you raise $200 million, and then you're taking a company public, and then suddenly all the investors pull out, you have nothing left. And so that causes a lot of problems. There's options at that point, but they're not great.
Yeah, and I saw that happen with a couple cases. I can't remember the name, but at least one security company SPAC, like when they hit that point, everybody pulled out, and the whole thing they pumped the brakes and canceled the whole thing. Yeah,
there was a lot of those. I think we knew it was. We started ours before the mania. We started ours in January of 2020, and that was right before COVID. And we went to RSA, and we just met with 1 million security companies, and COVID was rolling out. And then right after that, everybody started a SPAC. I think I knew it was insane when we were in a meeting against, I think it was Shaquille O'Neal's SPAC or something like that. I was like, oh, Shaquille O'Neal has a SPAC? We're in big trouble. That's when I knew the gig was up.
That's pretty good. So we've seen that funding is down, and certainly just about any market, there's areas to thrive and do well. You mentioned AI, artificial intelligence, and companies like OpenAI are primed for funding now since it's the next big thing. What else do you feel fits in this balance of hype versus promise? And do segments within cryptocurrency rise this level for you?
So look, let's see, hype versus promise. AI briefly, I think there's a lot of potential there. We're seeing some really cool security startups, kind of building on AI. And I'm not just talking about existing companies that are sprinkling a little AI fairy dust on them and, calling themselves AI, because you're seeing a lot of that too. And sometimes that's valuable, but we're seeing some really cool AI startups as of late in the security space, in the identity space in particular, which is like where I think there could be some really big leaps, like some wormholes to the future, potentially bypassing a lot of stuff. Cryptocurrency, one of those places where just tons of money poured into it. We dabbled in it briefly during the pandemic, a little bit after. I was into Bitcoin, and we kept our cryptocurrency investment strictly to the Bitcoin Lightning Network, which is a second layer protocol that is a scaling solution for Bitcoin transactions. And we've invested almost exclusively in companies that were building privacy forward solutions on top of that network, like encrypted communications, like a Zoom, hyper private Zoom and things like that, using the rails of the Lightning Network. But I think the rest of the cryptocurrency ecosystem, I'm glad we didn't dabble in it. These tokens and things like that, they just never really made any sense to me. Maybe I just wasn't smart enough to understand them, but that worked out in the end because the hype is just beyond. I think there's a lot of potential for cryptocurrencies in the world, and I think there's a lot of awesome use cases. I've been to El Salvador a number of times and seen kind of what they're trying to do there. But even there, a country that's supposedly adopted Bitcoin, it's still really hard to use Bitcoin there. I could use it at Papa John's and Starbucks, and like that was about it.
That's pretty good.
I mean, it wasn't designed for that scale, right? I remember somebody, and I think they fixed some things with the network, but like the Bitcoin, like the fastest it could go was orders and orders of magnitude off what we currently saw payment networks doing with like Visa and MasterCard and stuff like that.
Yeah. With the Lightning Network, as long as, there aren't 2 billion people in the world using it at the same time, at its current level of scaling, it works pretty well. Like, go somewhere and, buy a beer with the Lightning Network and other things, and I've done it. Bought surfing lessons with Bitcoin. Papa John's, by the way, is a really nice restaurant in El Salvador, so it's that's one of the reasons why they've got all the kinks worked out.
It's kind of like Taco Bell in the future, right?
Yes, that's right.
Demolition Man, is that a Demolition Man reference?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
Same.
I had a quick follow-up for you, Hank, about the AI and the companies that have kind of popped up around it. One thing that was interesting to me this week in the news was around updates to ChatGPT, and more specifically how they've expanded the capabilities of it. And from what I read, it seemed like there were a bunch of startups that had enhanced and kind of were leveraging ChatGPT to do more than what it was doing at the time. And now ChatGPT's recent expansion of capability by OpenAI has basically killed off the value prop of some of these other companies. When you're looking at a company that kind of builds on another technology like that, how much are you looking at could the parent kill off this other thing that's attached to it, so to speak, or do you look for more symbiotic type relationships between these companies?
Yeah, with AI in particular, I guess you got to think about that a lot more now, because it's like this whole other like life form out there that could potentially kill off lots of things. We've got a couple of companies in our portfolio that we very early on were like, oh man, what's going to happen with this? So far, we felt ultimately, after weeks of evaluating it, we felt it was more of a complement than a killer app. But we do have to look at that a lot. There's a lot of companies. Here's an example. A lot of the deep fake detection category. We see a lot of companies that are out there claiming to detect deep fakes and having counter information warfare capabilities. And I think the the InfoWar subcategory of cybersecurity is going to be much more commercially viable than it has been in the past, not just like for the military sector, but for the commercial sector. It's becoming like a need in corporate America. But there are still just, looking at deep fake detection, I like, okay, built the whole company around this, but I feel like we might be able to just use some other existing AI product line out there that might be free to kind of do the same thing 6 months from now. So, putting our way back machine hat on, but our future forward, back to the future hat on every time we look at these things it's a real part of our diligence.
Yeah, it's over the last 6 months, we've probably had 2, maybe 3 dozen AI security companies come across, or at least that I've come across while prepping for the show. And that's I literally just made the to-do list item to list them all out, break them into categories, and because it's just all over the place. Like some of them are focused on making sure the wrong training data doesn't go into your LLM set. Some are actively protecting input and output that goes into AI LLM systems. Some of them are focused on anti-phishing and the deep fakes and stuff like that. There's a ton of different use cases there. And, some of them stronger than others, right? Like literally one of them that I saw is just a plugin or an extension that you put in Chrome, that's reading the text that you submit into just ChatGPT, not Bard and Copilot, just ChatGPT, and making sure you're not putting sensitive company data in there. So it's DLP for your text box on ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking. I think I know the company you're talking about. Yeah, I've seen that. Very specific.
And obviously that could be expanded to be a bit more broad, but man, that's going to be tricky. Like already AI alignment is really tricky. And determining if something's sensitive or not and somebody's inputting, like you have to know so much about the company. I mean, you basically have to have like LLM level knowledge of what constitutes sensitive for that specific company to know if it's going into ChatGPT or not.
Yep. Yeah, it's not. I feel like maybe at a very high level, there's a lot of things you can quickly run through and say, okay, that's probably, you spend 5 seconds looking at something, you can be like, okay, that's probably sensitive. That's probably sensitive. But beyond that, you're going to probably slow down business operations if you start tagging things the wrong way. Sounds really difficult.
Yeah. So Sean noticed that your former Army intel, and Sean, you want to dive into? We've still got about 7 minutes left. Do you want to dive into cyber war, stuff like that, before we wrap?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Hank, I saw in your bio that you're former Army military intelligence person, and so I was wondering what your thinking was around where we are in the current state of cyber war in the world. Certainly, we're seeing real wars, certainly in Israel and Ukraine and others, little skirmishes as they pop up. What are your thoughts about the current state of cyber war and what companies are rising to meet that challenge that's interesting to you?
Yeah, I mean, I still see the financial services industry as being on the cutting edge, throwing the most resources at the front lines of security because they have to, and they've had to for a long time, and they're scooping up a lot of the best talent to man those trenches. They're still the ones that are buying redundant tools, so they can have like this defense in depth and redundant tactics that are used in the military, overlapping fields of fire and redundancy and all these terms that are used in the military, like that. Those principles and that tradecraft is happening in the financial services industry still. From what I'm in Washington, and I go to a lot of meetings, and in a lot of ways the security apparatus for our country still looks to financial services a lot of times for what the state of the art is. But there's some great things happening in government too. I'm seeing a lot of promise in organizations and the way they share information across agencies, but still really scary. I mean, we don't know. I mean, if I were to somebody were to ask me do you trust our systems when we need them most? In, let's say, in a shooting war with China, and I think most generals in the Pentagon that know something about this would say, not fully. We don't really know if our systems are going to work when we need them most, because there's been so many footholds gained into our systems, either through intrusions or through supply chain interdictions, where we have hardware in our systems now with software on it that we don't know where it came from, and there's so much of it that we haven't been able to go back and evaluate all of it. And then last but not least, I think the biggest information warfare weapon ever created, TikTok, is now being deployed for the first time ever to shape the narrative around a conflict that could get big really fast. And, so we have 21-year-old Americans forming opinions based on a Chinese built info sharing tool that's really a weapon. So we're in a really bad place. That's my assessment.
Absolutely. And that's a great point around the marketing around disinformation. I mean, we've been in an information age for years with the internet, and certainly TikTok is an extension of that. And it becomes more difficult with the algorithms that are then pushing information, and it just becomes this echo chamber of the same, right? I can definitely speak to having seen a lot of different organizations and environments from their directory systems that manage and provide authentication and controls for most, or if not all, of the other systems in organizations and companies, including financials, that it's not a good situation. Most organizations have very significant security issues. So I echo the general's concerns about these systems across different areas within government, as well as the private sector.
Yep.
Yep, and it's I mean, we're seeing some pretty scary trends there. We're talking about the Okta support site breach later today, and a support site getting breached. If I just told you that and you didn't know the details of it, wouldn't sound like a big deal. A list of, hey, I'm having this problem with Okta, until you learn about the fact that people are uploading sessions with authentication tokens in them, and it looks like there were the main targets were other security companies. So right. that starts getting really scary, and clearly, even non-nation state attackers realize the value of attacking things that give them the benefits of scale. Attack one thing, get access to thousands of customers.
Right. Yep.
All right. Any predictions? You already made one, I think, saying we're going to see some zombie customers or companies, security startups in 2024. Any other predictions on what we're going to see? That's market related, startup related in the next year or so.
Zombie companies. I think you're going to see potentially. Here's a prediction. You're going to see the kind of the next generation of what is an endpoint security company coming into being, and it's going to be the endpoint security. We saw antivirus companies kind of morph into endpoint security companies being the infantry of cybersecurity, and you're going to start to see the emergence of what's next beyond just what we're calling endpoint security companies now becoming that infantry of the core enterprise security stack.
So I'm not sure what that. Could you clarify a bit for me? I'm not sure I followed that.
Right,
something's going to replace them.
Something's going to replace them. I think you're going to see things starting to replace them. Yes, identity, and identity with supercharged with some AI functionality, and I think that's gonna be where people look to say that's the cornerstone of cybersecurity. That's kind of a bold prediction, but I'm making it nonetheless.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's definitely a good one. Yeah, I've been hearing CISOs and security leaders say, you know what, forget the endpoint. Like if I've done a good job with zero trust, it shouldn't matter. Or at least employee-facing endpoints. Yeah. All right. Well, Hank, thank you very much for joining us at Enterprise Security Weekly today. It's been a great conversation, and we appreciate you coming out and taking the time.
Absolutely. This is a fun conversation. Thanks.
All right. Stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk about data chaos with Jackie McGuire from Cribl. If your organization is ready to embrace edge computing, we have good news. The 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report provides everything you need to know to get started. In the report, we identify the common characteristics of edge computing. We found edge use cases are rapidly coming online, and we reveal how to secure edge computing. Most importantly, you'll learn how to prepare for your edge ecosystem. Get your complimentary copy of the report today. Visit securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. That's securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. Hey, Security Weekly listeners, we are celebrating the milestone of reaching over 1,000 members of our CISO community. The Cybersecurity Collaboration Forum is a one-stop shop for executive collaboration comprised of CISOs across various industries. If you want to be part of this growing community of CISOs, join us as a member or technology partner. To learn more, visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity collaboration. All right. And for our second interview today, Jackie McGuire joins us to talk about the fight to curb data chaos. Jackie McGuire is a senior security strategist at Cribl. As a data scientist and thought leader, Jackie writes, speaks, and memes about security. I love that part of the bio. Prior to joining Cribl, Jackie was a research analyst with S&P Global within the same group that I used to work for, 451 Research, but not at the same time. We didn't overlap. Covering technologies including SIM, SOAR, and XDR. As a data scientist, Jackie developed behavior analysis and anomaly detection models for a SIM, and she's also been a co-founder, CEO, and CFO for several startups. And before her work in technology was a licensed securities broker and SEC-registered investment advisor. I usually don't spend that much time on bios, but it was all interesting, so I had to keep it all in. Welcome to the show, Jackie.
Thank you. Yeah, I often refer to myself as fully weaponized ADHD. So I've done a lot of things.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I also have the ADHD, so I appreciate that. That's great. So thanks for being here. Really looking forward to this conversation. And when I was an analyst at 451, and I used to talk about the future of security, do kind of like the, decade plus roadmap, like where are we going, what's coming next and what's not coming at all. I always predicted data security would be the very last thing that we would really try to effectively tackle. It looked like, especially if you're starting a startup, you gotta, most people don't choose DLP. Like that's a really hard thing to build. And even though we've seen many generations of it, I don't think anybody thinks of it fondly. Like when you talk about data security, people immediately their minds go to DLP, and generally that does not bring up the fondest memories. And it's just because it has to be convenient to use for us to be productive. And attaching any controls to data tends to take away that convenience and the ability to be productive with it. So that's the reason I was predicting like this would be one of the last things that we tackle, or at least the last thing that we get right.
Oh yeah, get right for sure, right? And I think if you're trying, and part of it is because this is kind of the smallest unit of measurement, right? So we're trying to address things at kind of a cellular level when we're talking about data, and DLP I think addresses the other side of the equation, but doesn't actually start to address the data creation problem, which is and to your point, it's this balance that we're constantly trying to strike between this move fast, break things, innovate, and also maybe you should ask somebody before you park a bunch of data somewhere. So it's this constant push and pull, and we're all trying to find the right balance there, but it's a huge problem. And I think oftentimes when problems are massive and complex, people aren't really comfortable with iterative solutions. They want kind of a sweeping solution, and we're not really going to find that with data, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you hit an important point there. You said somebody deciding to park a bunch of data somewhere. I think that's one of the huge challenges here is, we tend to be over permissive with data, because trying to apply zero trust principles, least privilege, just results in pain, right? Like it's, I need access to this, you didn't give me access to this. The number of your requests you're going to have to submit or pester somebody or something like that. Like most people would much rather give you access to way more than you need and not get all those extra requests for access to things. And it's and then once you have access to that data, you can download it, you can put it in your personal Dropbox, you can email it to yourself. Like there's so many ways that you can lose control of that data. And I think that's part of what makes this such a huge challenge is that in a lot of organizations, everybody's got access to everything.
Yeah. And whether they realize it or not, and sometimes people don't even understand the nature of the information that they're dealing with, right? People don't always understand the sensitivity of things. I think we've gotten better with things like PII, that we know that dates of birth and social security numbers and addresses are important. But I think in the last segment, you were just talking about session IDs. How many people know, how many people outside of security know that tokens shouldn't be shared, even know what a token is? So we oftentimes are trying to control data after it's already been created, rather than addressing it at the point of creation, which is an extremely difficult thing to do, right? It's really, really easy to say, okay, once this specific type of data is already created, here's what you can do with it. But it's really hard to identify that type of data as it's created and then put policies in place as to how it can be stored or where it can be stored. So it's a really challenging problem.
So what do you think? Like, is that the holy grail is to tag and categorize this data at the point of creation so that you don't have to do, all this guesswork, regex, classification, with ML models further on down the line?
Yeah, I think because I'm a data scientist, I always look to, this is when you have a problem that deals with massive amounts of information, because we're talking about basically all data, right? Which is currently there's like 64 to 70 zettabytes of data being created annually right now. So I think to me, the solution could also end up being a huge problem. And this is, there's a constant dichotomy in security between single source of truth and single point of failure, right? So to me, the answer is each byte of data represents an actual data point, right? A date, a timestamp, it represents some value of something. And so to me, the capturing the unique value and only creating it once and then creating customers of that value so you can actually track each path data takes to other people, other places, other storage is really kind of the holy grail. But that's expensive. It's very difficult to do. But I think in the long run, once we have figured it out, it actually will save enterprises insane amounts of money. Because if you think about things like how often the same piece of data is created multiple times throughout an organization, if we can figure out how to stop that from happening and only store that data once and then distribute it, that actually saves quite a bit of storage space, compute, money, which is really the only thing that makes the world work. So, I think it's a problem that is going to be costly to solve, but once we do, we'll actually save in the long run.
Yeah, and just kind of a hot take here, but I feel like the solution it can't involve end users doing the right thing, right? Like I can't even imagine getting employees to use like file naming conventions or anything like that. Like it's got to be something that happens transparently behind the scenes, in my opinion. Any solution that's based on, the user has to do this. They're not going to right click, go to properties, and type in a comment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, nor should they have to, right? Because those are the things that are really good. There's a lot of AI and machine learning right now are super hot. It's oftentimes a solution in search of a problem. But this is one case that this is actually a problem that it's a really good solution for, and that naming conventions can be repeated very easily. They can, and in fact, even if humans are really well trained, even if you have a team that's going to right click and go to properties, that doesn't mean they're not going to make a typo. And so this is a great application for, robots should probably be doing this work.
So how you download a paper, from, like a research paper or something like that, and it comes with that completely useless name on it. Like it's never the title of the academic paper, right? Like it's always just like a series of numbers and letters, or like the equivalent of an ISDN, or like just a filing number. So I've been testing out a web browser called Arc, made by the browser company. And one of their new features is they will automatically rename your downloads to something useful. And they're looking at metadata or data in the file. I'm not sure exactly how they're doing it, but it freaking works. And it's like you'll get a little pop-up that says, hey, your file was renamed. And it shows you the new name that it gave the file.
Well, and think about that from a picture perspective, right? Because how much compute power are we using every time I go into Google Photos and I search for like dog to find a picture of a dog, because all of the photos in my Google Photos are PXL timestamp something random, right? So every time I search Google Photos, it's got to do that image analysis, and it's got to go to those meta tags. Or if you would just name the file correctly in the first place, that wouldn't be a thing. So now I'm going to have to go try that out.
Sean, I think you had a question here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was touched on a little bit already, but really the tools for protecting data is better than what it used to be, where on the fly we can adjust who has access to the document itself, or documents, including we can adjust if they can edit it, they can read it, they can print it, they can copy it, they can share it. But obviously the challenge is appropriately identifying who should have access to that content. And you touched on this a little bit already, Jackie. Really, my question is, how can we leverage computers such as machine learning or AI in order to better categorize that data, so that way the automation behind it can enable who has access to what when they need to?
The answer, I think, is definitely yes. Everywhere from looking into the file and actually assessing the contents and tagging. So I personally, and I have to credit my boss with helping me develop this opinion. I think data identification and categorization is probably going to end up being its own subcategory within DLP, within data in general, because we've got this issue across a lot of areas, right? Not just like, should somebody have access to this file, but also like, oops, I dumped 400 terabytes of data into a data lake, and now I don't know what any of it is, if I have the right to even hold it, like things like that. Because as we pass more regulations about, hey, you can't keep PII for longer than this amount of time, it's also like, are you holding data that you shouldn't be? So yes, it can all be accomplished. Now, the question is cost, right? Because cost is the reason that most of these problems exist in the first place, because security is something that most businesses look at as a cost center. So the goal is always do more with less, spend less on what you already have. So can we do it? Absolutely. Are we willing to commit the time and resources to doing it? I don't know. But I do think that some of the advancements we're making in things like large language models and AI, and the ability to create an internal large language model at an enterprise and help categorize different kinds of data specific to that enterprise and help that language model learn and then look within documents, that would make it those types of like specific training exercises can help make it less expensive to correctly identify those things. So I think we're headed that way, but for God's sakes, most enterprises don't even require MFA. So to think that we're going to get to
right.
Artificially intelligent data categorization and file naming and all, I mean, yeah. So the goal, right, is to establish like ideal best practices so that as companies start to set themselves up from scratch over the next couple decades, we'll gradually get better, right?
Absolutely. I'm certain that the intelligence of my phone would end up naming photos dog, parens open, 1, close parens, open parens, 2, close parens, and things like that. Getting back to
Machine
the
number 287.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And of course,
But, so here's the thing, though, right? Is that where regulations and best practices and standards and all of that fail, money works. So we're starting to see things that are changing the industry, like this new SEC disclosure rule, right? So we would never have known about the Clorox breach, the Johnson controls, or how all of them are connected without this SEC regulation. I think the same thing is going to happen with data categorization and identification, because cyber insurance is getting significantly more expensive. And because actuaries, who are the statisticians within insurance companies that calculate loss and coverage and decide what to charge you for premiums to make sure the insurance company is still profitable, because they weren't experts in data, the way they value the data a company holds and the way they value the potential loss of that data has not necessarily been accurate. So one of the things I think is going to start to change is how we value data as an asset and as a liability. And categorization and identification will be absolutely critical for that, because a social security number is a lot more valuable than a port number, right? So it's not just I'm insuring X zettabytes of data, it's I'm insuring 10 gigabytes of critical data, and I think that's part of what's going to start to happen is for financial regulations are generally what causes things to change, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I think you made a great point there. There's different types of data that has different levels of value, and certainly organizations have data everywhere. They're on file shares, they're in Dropbox, they are probably in also Amazon buckets, S3 buckets, they're in Azure cloud storage blobs, it's in SharePoint, it's everywhere. And so companies don't even always know where their data actually is. So that's kind of one challenge of it, is that not knowing where the data is. Plus, like you said, this data is getting generated. Some of the problems around where the data is can be handled through some policy and even some technology about pushing into a specific place to hold that data. And there's regulatory things around that as well. But I'm going to ask the question because I was dared to. Is any aspect of the problem that we're having with data, can any of it be solved with blockchain? Because I am looking for a solution for this technology.
So funny enough, my boss and I had a conversation about this interview before, and I said, I kind of want to mention that this is one of the things that I thought blockchain was actually a really good application for. And he was like, don't talk about blockchain. I was like, but I don't mean cryptocurrency. Because to be fair, because I've spent 15 years in Wall Street and finance, I've never believed that. I believed it would take something seismic for crypto to get traction, only because, again, money makes the world go round, and there is a hell of a lot of money and lobbying power behind not distributing the power in finance. But blockchain, distributed ledgers, the ability to create a unique ID for a piece of data and go to the closest place that data is stored to access it and make sure that data can't be altered or replicated without... I do think that this is a really good application for blockchain. And I've been a huge believer in blockchain for a number of different reasons. Another thing is compute power, right? So think about how many smart devices and cell phones and just connected devices that have some level of compute power you have sitting around your house. Not everything needs to be done in a data center. There's a lot of compute power that you're using in a data center that's causing pollution that you could be doing around your house. So I do think that there are really, really realistic applications for distributed compute, distributed ledger, and blockchain in this area. I just hate that anytime you mention it, it gets conflated with cryptocurrency, because that's a very specific application of blockchain, or NFTs, because everybody's bitter about their use of their worthless NFTs now. But if you can kind of separate out all of those things, yes.
Yeah, so I was being a little whimsical with the question, certainly, because many people have different opinions on blockchain. And like you said, many point directly to crypto as the purpose of blockchain. But I think you're right. I think there are some situations where you need an immutable ledger around tracking the history of a specific file or files. And again, getting back to all data doesn't have the same value, whether it's intrinsic or explicit value, to almost the eye of the beholder, right? Because there's certain things attackers are going after because they're like, this is something that's incredibly valuable to us, but it may not be seen as high in priority or value to the organization itself. My next question, though, pivoting from that, is how do you think organizations can actually start solving this when they have file shares and they have different cloud storage devices or storage systems for files that users are creating, as well as a number of other cloud systems that are maybe portals like SharePoint? How do you think they can start kind of wrapping their arms and hands around this?
I think generally the answer for starting to address tech debt is it's actually the same answer to when I was a financial advisor. It's the same answer for starting to address your actual debt, which is, one, you have to change how you do things right now and going forward. And then you have to start to go backwards and address the problems that you created doing things in a different way. So I think one is that we need to develop significantly better policies around data creation. So if you're going to be storing something on your, you have the ability now to sync endpoints with the cloud. So I think there are ways for enterprises through like Google Drive and things like that to say, I need to be able to look at everything that you're creating in terms of data on an endpoint and then have some way to categorize that data. And then once you've done that, then you can start saying, okay, because we now have better policies in place for how we're creating data, we can now go back through the data that we're storing and decide, do we still need to be storing it? If we do, how many different copies of this IP address exist, and do they all actually need to exist? But then I also, I don't even know if I should bring this up. The other issue is that you could have the same IP twice and it actually means two different things, right? So the other issue is that you have to come up with some way to figure out when data actually should be duplicated, which I don't even begin to know how to address. That's why I didn't remain a data scientist.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things that I talk about a lot within my company, Trimark, is really about having a source of truth for a specific data point or data record. So where can someone find this thing that is authoritative for this subject or whatever it is, even if there's other things elsewhere that people might generate or create? And I think you're right. There's got to be a few different approaches to how data is created, how it's stored, almost like the life cycle of data, sort of like the life cycle of an identity, which is something I focus on a lot. But the other challenge around this is, there's so many file shares out there that are just open to everyone on the corporate network. And because people don't necessarily understand who should have access to it, I actually made a big mistake many years ago, and early in my career, I was trying to lock down permissions on shares, and I ended up locking out everybody, including myself. Thankfully, I did this on a Saturday, but it was a 10-hour mistake that I ended up having to undo. And the only way I could do that is because I did have something that I had set up initially as an emergency fix-it. What's that?
I said that was true zero trust.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, absolutely zero trust. But
yeah, that's the problem, though, right? Is it's painful. And this is, I've had, God, I can't even tell you how many times I've had this conversation at different companies I worked at, and that, yes, this is a big problem, but it's only going to get bigger. And so at some point you have to rip the Band-Aid off. And does that involve potentially locking down some file share systems where people lose access to the things they need? It might. And that's the problem right now, right? Is that we don't really have great controls over our data. The reason I took the job at the company that I work for is because it's kind of like this universal pipeline for data. And I was actually talking to a customer earlier today who was talking about trying to replace their SIM. And they were saying, replacing a SIM is incredibly difficult because you either have to take the new SIM and get it all the way embedded into your enterprise. And then the stand-up failure rate for SIM is close to 50%. So you're taking a 50% chance that it's not going to work, and then you're going to have to figure out how to rip the whole thing back out, deal with all the data that was created. And what the company I work for does is it creates pipelines that would allow you to just fork the data going to your current SIM to a new one instead of having to use all their collectors and stuff. And like that's kind of like, until we get a better control over how data is even allowed to flow through an enterprise, like that's one of the biggest issues, right? Is that like when you have all these open file shares and you have a breached endpoint, and all of a sudden somebody starts moving a whole bunch of stuff, like the only way we're really detecting that stuff right now is user and entity behavior analytics, sometimes like hard-coded data size transfer limits, but there's really not a great way to do that. So until you have better visibility into what data is flowing and where, which most enterprises just aren't monitoring today.
Yeah, and it's hard to monitor too. And I would say ransomware is how most organizations realize that they have a data access problem. And that's the reality. Yeah. It's unfortunate though, but that's going back to this convenience debt, this technical debt. That's where we've been, is that these things have just kind of been ignored. Like, yeah, the data's there somewhere. Someone's using it. Someone's doing something with it. It'll be fine. Everything's fine here.
Yeah. Well, and like the National Cybersecurity Strategy that the Biden administration released, they basically were like, all federal agencies are going to address their tech debt by this year. And I just laughed, right? Like, I think everybody did, because it's like, the first job I had in data science was writing anomaly detection for a SIM. And it was this SIM that catered to banks and credit unions. And believe it or not, small banks and credit unions still use those old, like late 1970s, early 1980s IBM core banking servers. Why? Well, because your banking server has to be available 24 hours a day. How the heck do you upgrade or replace it if it needs to be available 24 hours a day and can literally never be disconnected? So we literally had customers where if somebody walked into the room that server was in and shut the wrong light switch off, an entire bank would go down. That is not hyperbole. Wow. That actually happened. So, yeah, I mean, addressing tech debt when you're talking about we have banks running on 50-year-old servers is just, until we have a law that says it has to be done, it's not going to happen, right?
So I want to challenge the statement that eventually we have to rip the Band-Aid off, because it seems like maybe intentionally or through apathy, some of these, sometimes you don't have to, right? Like if there's a big enough paradigm shift, like the move from using on-prem Windows file servers to cloud storage, right? Change the game in a lot of ways. Like I generally don't spend a whole lot of time organizing my files on my laptops and desktops anymore, because search tools are decent enough that in a second or less, because of indexing, I can find exactly what I'm looking for, because I generally know what name is going to be in the file or what metadata is going to be in the file. So I wonder if maybe that's an alternate route here, like we figure out how to do it transparently enough that behaviors don't have to be changed.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think search is the other way. You can do what you're saying. You can basically just accept that, like, we're not going to get through our data backlog. We have all of this data. It's stored in all of these different places. So the best thing that we can do is protect it, make sure nobody can get in and get to it, and then focus our energy on being able to search it. How do we search it? How do we explore it? How do we, if we need to find out whether it holds this kind of data or not, how do we figure that out? It's actually another thing that Cribl's working on. So we have a product called Search, because that was the other thing, is that we the enterprise, our ability to generate data has completely outstripped our ability to draw value from a lot of that data, to protect that data, to, analyze that data. And so AI and machine learning and data lakes and these massive data storages is really the only way that we're handling it now. But there are very few good, cost-effective ways to search those things. So, I will give you that. Maybe you don't have to completely rip the Band-Aid off. You just have to find a way to peek underneath it every once in a while and make sure it's not infected. I don't know.
and searching across those disparate systems is virtually impossible too. Searching across file shares, searching across the Microsoft platform and AWS and others, and finding where that data is incredibly challenging. And there's another impact to this as well that we've seen a lot on our security assessments that we do for customers is older appliances, device appliances that are storage appliances that hold these files and shares. There's so many files and documents on these appliances that they cannot easily be shifted over or upgraded, which means that it holds back the security of the enterprise because it's an older version, it can't be upgraded, and it doesn't support the more recent security protocols. So there's there's also this kind of monster under the bed or in the closet as well, using the fact that Halloween was this week. There's a lot of problems when it comes to this data situation that we have.
Yeah, and that I know of, Cribl search is actually one of, I think it's the only kind of federated search that can go across all of the different cloud providers on-prem, and you're right, there are not, and we're still, it's a new product, we just launched it last year, so we're still kind of building it out. So the end vision of the product is this full visibility, because what it can do is search data at rest. Because the other thing is, like, even if you know where stuff is, if you have stuff in like cold storage, it can be extremely expensive to search that. And a lot of times, previous solutions, you had to rehydrate the whole thing. And I always call it, like, one of the real kicks in the pants after you get breached is that when your incident response contractor comes in, you have to pay insane amounts of money to pull all these different data sources in just for them to start looking through them, which is also probably going to cost a lot of money. So that's kind of the goal of search, is like, let's make it so that you can search data at rest, get the results, only pay to move the results, and then not have to pay to move or sort through all of this data. But yeah, it's incredibly difficult. And then, the other thing that the product uses that drew me to the company is that we have the ability to kind of take all of these different old school data sources that are coming out of this legacy technology and turn it into something you can read, right? Take syslog and turn it into JSON so you can actually look at it, those types of things. So I don't want to pitch the product. There's a reason I work here, right? There's a reason I chose to work there, but that's kind of some of the things that I am hoping that we can start to address, because the real thing that I saw as soon as I came to security to write data science for a SIM is like, nobody can even deal with the file formats that this data is coming in, because it wasn't written for security. It was written for developing and monitoring and things like that. So we're trying to turn these logs that were not written for this purpose into something meaningful, and that's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, and again, back to my original point about why this would be the last thing that we tackle, and it's just it's only more and more and more though. But I mean, I do have hope in things like you shared the photo search problem. It's like, how, now it's so easy for me to take photos. I can take 40 photos in a day. So how do I find that picture of my pet from 2 months ago? Like it's going to be 10 minutes of scrolling up through old pictures, but now they're using AI to recognize things in pictures, so I can search for beer to find the bottle of beer that I liked, or dog or something like that to find I think it'll even recognize pets now, where you can identify like individual.
You can name
pets.
your pets, and and this is like, if you're willing to trade privacy for convenience. Yeah. And in a lot of situations I am. Yeah, you could name your pets, you could name your people, and it tracks them all. It's incredibly convenient.
But naming my pets gives away my password, so I shouldn't do that.
Say again? Sorry.
Well, so that's one of the, I know we're at time, but that's one of the really interesting things about the kind of data that's valuable right now, right? Because you might think that if an attacker gets into your Slack channels, it's not a huge deal. But if I can find out some names of your pets, the coworkers you frequently, that all makes social engineering so much easier. So that kind of data now, your favorite brand of coffee, is now becoming significantly more valuable.
Yeah, so actually, it's a good point. When I used to train pen testers, pen testers juniors would get access to things when we were out on an engagement, and they would ask me, okay, I've got an AD account, or, I'm domain admin or something like that. What now? And I would tell them to go find a file server and just start digging. And I mean, you would find executive signatures, you'd find invoices, you'd find, I mean, pretty much everything you need to watch the color drain from an executive's face in the report that you hand off, because it's just all a dumping ground. And Slack is just the latest, right?
Yeah. Well, if I can find an IT manager's kid's name, and I can, this is the Okta support system thing, right? And this is like, hackers are like, the thing that I keep saying, hackers are not breaking into your network. They're just logging in. They're convincing somebody to reset a password and just give them access. Like, they don't have to hack in. And the types of data that you need to get that access is changing. And some of it is personal information.
Yeah, the scariest malware out there, I think, are the info stealers that just sweep up all your OAuth keys, and now they have your logged in sessions.
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry, Sean, you were trying to say
this is fun. I'm going to sleep so well tonight.
Good. I know. I was going to say that. I mean, the Uber breach. The reason why that got so big was because the password file was on a share, and the attackers were able to pull an administrative password for their password manager that had access to Active Directory, their Microsoft Cloud environment, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just expanded from there. So I mean, there's so much data to mine on file shares in Slack and Teams and whatever else there is now, as you've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Microsoft data leak was something that shouldn't have happened if you were managing your data correctly, right? Like, they wanted to share some ML models that they were working on, so they put the ML models in a bucket, and they thought they shared the file maybe, and they didn't realize the access control gave access to the entire bucket. Wiz figured that out, published it, but what made it really spicy was the fact that there weren't just ML models in there. There were PC backups in there. So the backups of their laptops, their desktops were in there, and they weren't encrypted.
Unencrypted.
So they found auth keys, they found Teams messages, they found like everything bad that was found in that was because PC backups were unencrypted and not where they should have been. Right? Like, data was not where I think anybody would have, if they're really thinking about it, intended to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think some of this is like, we need to repair the relationship between security and the rest of the enterprise, so they don't see us as the enemy and like the nomad, the people that just come in to say no and kill everybody's dreams and innovation. Because in order to have security as a culture, people need to really believe that it's a worthwhile endeavor and not just a hurdle to all the shit you want to get done.
Yeah. Yeah. So good stuff. So any predictions you want to leave? We actually still do have a few minutes here. If you do, Jackie. Yeah. I would love to hear some predictions.
Well, I can't spoil them all because we're about to publish my team's 2024 predictions. I think we can all see the writing on the wall that next year is going to be tough in the industry, right? There's a lot of consolidation that's already starting to happen, and I think that's going to continue into next year. It'll be really interesting to see what comes of the White House's latest executive order on AI. I read through the briefing on it, and I think it's a good step in the right direction, but next year is going to be, I think, the year of a battle between the courts and regulatory authorities. So we'll see, whether CISA and NIST and all these different government agencies that are now tasked with developing policies and controls around AI, if those policies and controls are all challenged, then that what we've seen a number of times with technology is that the courts step in, and then we unfortunately have very unclear policies. So My prediction is that next year is everybody's focus is going to continue to be on AI, and we're going to start to see the manifestation of both the benefits and security, because I do think there are some companies doing some really interesting things with combating some of the very basic kind of user problems that we were talking about earlier, as well as some of the more interesting uses. Then I also think, boy, this SEC rule, when they initially published it, I was like, oh, snap. That's going to be rough, but I don't think anybody realized how rough it was going to be. And already in just a couple of weeks that we've seen some of these disclosures, I think the interconnectedness of a lot of these problems is going to start to become a lot more clear, like Okta at the center of all of these different breaches and things like that.
Yeah, certainly liability, and we're about to jump into the news segment where we're going to talk about people being personally liable. We're going to talk about, looks like Capital One is going to be forced to share all the details of how the breach happened, process issues and stuff like that, which I'm very excited about, because I feel strongly that we need, the incident details for the whole industry to benefit from, and so we can learn from mistakes at scale. It can't be secret. We got to know why people fail. Why companies fail.
Well, and that's like, I had written when I was an analyst, I had written that the reason that attackers are winning is because they're open sourcing everything and working together. And until security is willing to share information and work together, they will continue to win. Because we don't share incoming traffic data amongst the largest enterprises in the country, which we could figure out how to do in a secure way, we don't spot these scattered spider type attacks. We would have identified this months and months ago if we had visibility across, a wide arc of different enterprises in the US, but we just don't have that level of visibility. And where attackers have the level of coordination to be able to pull these attacks off, like maybe I've read The Art of War too many times, but you definitely need to think like your enemy to be able to conquer your enemy. And we are definitely not doing that right now.
Yeah, nobody wants to share. That's certainly an issue. Yeah. Well,
nobody wants to be liable. To your point, I mean, so the interesting thing, right, is with SolarWinds, and I don't want to steal your news segment, but with the charges there, it's interesting, right? And like the CISO's charged with the CEO is not. And so I think it raises questions about like who ultimately is liable for some of these things at the end of the day, and like to what degree, where's the separation between CISO, CEO, CFO, CTO, and where liability rests. And I think some of these prosecutions are going to have a huge impact on people's willingness to be CISOs, the cost of insurance, personal liability insurance for CISOs. I've already heard from people that it's getting more difficult to get that insurance. So that's a concern.
Yeah, I mean, just getting onboarded as a CISO, like I've heard from a lot of my friends, it's just it's months of redlining contracts back and forth, and like it takes months just to onboard somebody in that position when it's like a true executive level CISO role. But to throw out another example, in the case of Drizzly, it was the CEO that was sanctioned. Not that I don't know if they had a CISO or not, but yeah, it went a little differently in that case.
Yeah, and that's where I think like we have to have clear. I don't know. There needs to be some clear policies around this, and I would rather that not happen through. I'd rather that happen through policymaking and legislation than court decision, but oftentimes that's the way it's going to happen. So there has to be a balance, right? There has to be a balance between CISOs being held accountable for the decisions they make, but also giving them enough support to make decisions, tough decisions, because you can't anticipate everything. You just can't. And so I think, I don't know. It's this year is going to be. I think it's going to be a rough year in the market, and I think it's going to be an even rougher year in security.
It's going to be spicy for sure, and This is great. Maybe we'll have you back on next year as we start to see some of your predictions unfold and see some of the trends start to reveal themselves.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really, really enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, same here. Same here. This was great. And stick around. We'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.
Application Security Weekly delivers interviews and news from the worlds of AppSec, DevOps, and all the other ways people find and fix software flaws. Join us as we explore how the latest news highlights modern security practices or reminds us of the missing ones. We also bring insights from interviews on topics from training to threat modeling, from open source tools to cloud-native techniques, plus an occasional reference from new wave to synthwave. Find us at securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Application Security Weekly wherever you pick your podcasts.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join our Discord channel to chat with our hosts, ask questions, customize live stream alerts, and more. Visit securityweekly.com/discord to receive an invite. And now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW338 if you want to follow along as we go through the news, or for the links to the articles we're covering. And we started out with much less, but it kept growing. In fact, during the first interview today, I might have added 4 more news stories because stuff just keeps happening, and I can't stop it, folks. I can't prevent it. All right, so typically, this is not a typical week. Usually we have a bunch of funding and acquisitions. Here, there's only 2 funding items that I felt were interesting enough to maybe chat about. One of them is yet another company looking to help secure AI with a healthy $25 million Series A, Cranium. And then, I haven't read too much into it, haven't had the chance, but the other one here is that CISA awards cyber.org $6.8 million in funding for K-12 cyber education, which sounds pretty cool. Oh, and also, we have Mr. Josh with us, Mr. Josh Marpet. Hello, Josh.
Hey, Adrian, pleasure to be on board. Always looking to come on. This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good to have you here. Any comments on any of the funding before we move on to some fairly big acquisitions?
I am fascinated to find out what secure AI means, because I'm absolutely positive that it doesn't mean very much at the moment. And we'll see what they actually say, because there's so many facets of AI that need to be secured, from DLP from your prompts, bias in your training data, hallucinations in your outputs, third parties, there's so much. So I wonder what actual facets of this they're trying to secure and how bad it's going to be.
Secure all the things AI.
Secure all the things. So I've actually I've just started a list of AI companies. I'm going to go back the last couple of months because we've seen at least 2 or 3 dozen companies that are purporting to secure AI as opposed to using AI in a security product. This will be a list of companies that are specifically aiming to secure how you use AI, or whatever AI resources you're building in-house. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'll build the list and I'll figure out what categories live in there. I'm sure somebody's already doing some of this work, but it's usually good for me when a new market segment emerges to just go through this process just so that I understand each of these companies and what they're claiming to do. But yeah, it was somewhat more excited about the funding for K through 12. There's a local high school near me, Bearden High School, that where the cybersecurity teacher, they have a cybersecurity class and I think maybe 2 classes, and then they have a cybersecurity club, and they go do CTF competitions. So they do a lot of cool stuff, and they bring me in every semester. The teacher there does to talk to the kids. In fact, the episode we're bringing out of the archive for Thanksgiving will be my interview with Tim, the teacher who teaches those classes. So definitely interested in K through 12 getting funded for. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to see how they're going about it. Because a lot of it doesn't necessarily need to be specific to cyber. It needs to be understanding how privacy works, internet, like general digital citizenship type stuff, right? Like that, it's all foundational before you even start talking about what the bad guys can do, how to protect yourself and stuff like that.
I think cyber education is incredibly important, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there over the next few years. I mean, when I started B-Sides Delaware, we had Spawn Camp. We still do, but we taught them Scratch, and we taught them cybersecurity, and we taught them how to wire stuff, and it was a lot of fun. One of the basic things we realized that they didn't understand was how to take things apart and learn from that. Mm-hmm. And to unpack problems is the same kind of skill. And to unpack security is, let me understand the different aspects of security, in personal life and in whatever. So it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think stuff where it's kind of hard to undo is really important also, like understanding the edges of privacy, like when you post something, when you get into something, what you can and can't take back and who's going to be able to see it and what the potential social political outcomes of posting things are. Like that's you never want your kid learning that shit the hard way.
Living in a fishbowl is a pain in the ass.
Yep. All right, let's move on to so we're going to get into the Okta thing, but before I mean we don't necessarily have to do it in order, but number 6, I've got new tools. It feels very much like how did I say it in the intro? A spite tool. They created a spite tool because certainly in their write-up of the Okta incident, they were very, very salty about the fact that they didn't feel like their opinion of Okta and how they handled this incident was clearly low. And then a couple days later, they come out with this HAR sanitizer tool, and I tried to use it. I actually used PPWorks just as the test for it. You just go into the dev tools and you enable recording of the session, and dev tools within any Chrome or Chrome-based browser will allow you to create a HAR file. And then you pull it into this tool that they've created, and it shows you all the variables and cookies that you can then click to remove to sanitize the HAR file. But none of the names are useful or meaningful. And they don't show you any of the data behind those variables or cookies. So there's absolutely no way for me to figure out where the OAuth key is or what's sensitive, what's not sensitive. Like literally you have to be a developer of whatever SaaS platform you're working with to be able to use this tool successfully. So I think this is one of those things like, why don't people just patch? Why don't people just sanitize HAR files? Because it's not that simple, folks.
It sounds like a horrible experience.
Yeah.
Oh, God, seriously? I just got that.
Yep. A horrible experience. Yes, I said it. No, I think you're right, Adrian. And it's always bad when a company who is a victim in a breach scenario has to come up with a way to describe what happened to the provider that had that issue. Certainly talking about the support breach at Okta and the fact that Cloudflare felt like they had to put this tool together to help Okta better sanitize their inputs. This is very similar to what happened to Microsoft based on the Microsoft signing key that got in the wild, at least as far as what Microsoft has disclosed as part of it that they did over the summer, where the key was part of a crash dump file, which was the crash dump file was moved from production over into the production development environment where they were running through and opening that up, but that was connected to the internet, and they believed that signing key got dumped into the crash dump, which shouldn't have happened. Well, it could have happened, but then there should have been something to detect it. And then there should have been something that checked for it before it went over into the actual production development environment, and all those things failed. Meanwhile, Microsoft had set up a new strategy around how the signing worked across enterprise and consumer, but forgot to actually include checks in the code to ensure that they were separated. So what ended up happening is with this signing key, the attacker who pulled this, which based on the public information that has been provided, it was a Chinese threat actor, was using the signing key to then write their own tokens to access Exchange online mailboxes for about 25 organizations. And so this happened over the course of very targeted, yes, government and think tanks and others, very targeted. And it tracks very much with what this APT was after and have been after. And so what's interesting about this is because of that, Microsoft didn't think about or have that check in place when Exchange Online expanded to provide this unified library or I'll accept that. They didn't do their check there either. And so my understanding of it was it affected Exchange Online specifically and only, but there were a number of mailboxes that were accessed through this threat actor in these 25 or so organizations. So it sounds very similar. Like in this situation where you're trying to get something supported and you move this data over to here, if there's sensitive information like a token or a signing key, then that can lead to much bigger issues.
Yeah. And a lot of people like they're just not going to realize that stuff is in there. And again, like when Microsoft wrote up that incident that you're talking about, one of their lessons learned was to automatically sanitize crash dumps. And I remember thinking, like that's not going to be straightforward. Like imagine a DLP tool and the likelihood of false positives and how common it is to have false positives. And now imagine you're telling your DLP tool with that lack of accuracy to just remove stuff at random, right? That's not going to end well.
No.
This is like IDS, IPS. How many people actually turn on block? You know, I mean, like right, DLP. Right. How many people actually say get rid of the file if you think it's like no, because the false positive rate is god awful.
Yeah, it's not. There's not enough confidence in it. It's not trustworthy enough it's just not accurate enough.
Right. And at least with Microsoft, they could backtrack to see which tokens were created with that signing key and identify who was targeted, who was affected. With this, it's kind of tough to know. And the thing that really is unfortunate about this situation is that Cloudflare's like, hey, we were affected. I think 1Password was like, hey, we were affected. There's several different organizations that were like, hey, remember us? Like, we saw something happen around this. And Okta was just like, what? Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll look into it.
Yeah, and I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know if I was expecting some kind of standard where the variable name or the cookie, with the OAuth key was just going to be called OAuth or something like that. Like, I mean, if I was developing something, that would make sense, right? But in one application's case, it could be called Pineapple, and in another application's case, it could be called something completely different. Like it's you literally have to know what you're looking for, what it looks like, and this is a HAR file is just a text file, just a big text file with all the details from that session, and like it's very likely going to be huge. Like talking about 20 megs of uncompressed text that you're looking for an OAuth key in. Good luck. Like I don't see a simple solution to this problem. Like no. I don't know if there are companies out there. If you've worked with a company that has a good process for sanitizing HAR files, I would love to hear about it. Let us know.
How about those? Damn it! Is it pretty printing for JSON stuff? Like extracting JSON and making it actually readable. I wonder if there's something like that for HAR files.
Well, so even if you did that, you still have the same problem though. You still don't know.
Yeah. Agreed.
You've made it prettier, but you still don't know if it's pineapple or grape or like which one has the OAuth key in it.
Valid point. I just
And at the end of the day, I don't know. At the end of the day, Adrian, isn't every file a text file with the right parser and opener? So I mean, JSON, XML. Now we have HAR
Linux nerd. Everything's a file. Damn it! Everything's in text. Shut up! If it's not in text, it doesn't exist.
And maybe I'm overlooking something. Like I was hoping there'd be some way to some standard way to remove the secrets. But and if I'm overlooking something, let us know. But I would love to hear that there's an easy solution to this. But from my own testing, it didn't look easy at all. All right, so we also have got a lot of government like not necessarily regulatory stuff, but stuff from CISA in the news today. Stuff from so Oak Ridge National Labs now has a Center for Artificial Intelligence Security Research. I imagine it's probably not the only one out there popping up. Maybe not even the only one at a national lab.
Sorry, there's the Berkeley AI Risk Management Framework, BAIR, from a guy named Stuart Russell. There's
I'm sure MITRE's doing stuff here.
Sorry?
MITRE's probably doing stuff here as well with AI security.
Well, there's the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, and I'm sure MITRE's working on that with NIST. Of course, that they go hand in hand.
No, I think we reported on something that MITRE's doing in this space also.
Oh, cool, good, because I like them. They do good work. If they can do something along the lines of the attack and defend framework to lay things out intelligibly, that would be lovely. Okay. The NIST AI Risk Management Framework is actually pretty good. They've got some very good core principles. The Singapore AI Risk Management Framework is interesting. It's a very different mindset. I'm really curious to see how do they pronounce that, by the way? Kaiser? Is it a Kaiser roll or a
I've been saying Kaiser, as in like a Kaiser roll. Yeah, that's what I've been saying.
I like Kaiser.
We'll tell you know what? We've decided it's Kaiser. They're going to take it. Sorry, that's it. But
yeah, I didn't see any pronunciation guides, so that's what I'm going with.
There's a lot of AI think tanks springing up, and it's going to be interesting to see which ones really become the accepted industry standard.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm having trouble finding it, but I know we did report on the MITRE project. I think it was the same episode or the same week OWASP announced their top 10 for LLMs, and I heard about this MITRE AI project at the same time. But yeah, lots going on there. Number 7 is also coming out of the government. Logging Made Easy is the name of this tool, and it's meant for, I think, organizations with maybe no security team at all and just have a need to ship around logs and to collect logs and some very basic SIM level, satisfy some very basic SIM level functionality.
Although I love on the disclaimer, it says this is not a professional tool and should not be used as a SIM.
Yeah,
well, it's a logging tool.
Guess who
it's
your
not
audience
a SIM.
is? Yeah,
right.
But I'm really curious. I mean, like Security Onion's been out for how long now? But it's not an end-to-end. Security Onion is a collection that you can use. I'm sorry, Adrian, I didn't mean to step on you. Please go ahead.
I think Security Onion first came out in like 2008, 2009.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
But you have to put them together. You have to plug them into each other. You have to transfer the data, pipe the data from one tool to another tool to another tool. As I read this says we've built all the, plug in one end to your endpoints and plug in the other end to whatever SIM you want. And it is the entire data pipeline for you to get the data from A to B.
Right. Yeah. So this one is very specific. It's centralized security logging for Windows clients, so Windows built-in can already do that. You can set up Event Viewer to send logs to another Windows machine. So you could use pretty much any Windows 11 device to collect logs from all your other Windows devices. Like that functionality is built into Windows. But I think they're doing some detection here as well. They've got some detective capability.
Based on what I'm seeing, it's Sysmon on the Windows client that then is using WinLogBeat to collect, and then it goes into Elk server.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I wonder what part because all that stuff already exists and can be plugged together. So
I think it's just the glue putting it together.
Yeah, duct tape. You say glue, I say duct tape. But yeah,
exactly. It's probably duct tape.
Sometimes that is the hard part, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's why
baling twine.
Yeah, they say that the software used by it on the Elk server is Docker, Git, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. So it's similar to what a bunch of other folks have kind of put together. It makes sense because there's going to be organizations that have no idea what to do or how to put that together. And oftentimes plugging those things together is the hard part.
Yeah. All right. So as we're talking about AI, we might as well knock out all the AI things. Number 8, I'm sure you've been talking about that a lot, Josh. But I feel like they overlooked the opportunity to call this the Skynet Prevention Act, but this is Biden's executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. And I've heard mostly positive things from people. And that seems to be a trend with cyber stuff coming from the White House is, actually, this is This is not 5 or 10 years behind. We're impressed.
It's not 5 or 10 years behind, but it's going to make us 5 or 10 years behind, and that's the problem, I think. Everywhere we are the last major country with
putting restrictions.
Yeah, we're the last major country with no restrictions. China has more AI restrictions and regulation than we do. The EU has massively more. We had none. That's why all of those creators were flocking to the US to do AI work here. Okay. Also, the fact that the Silicon Valley money is there didn't hurt. But let's be clear: the restrictions on money are why they're here. Now that these restrictions are out there, that and some of them are, and I'm not bitching or denigrating them in any way, shape, or form, but they're gonna cause some issues. You have to test and make sure that your AI doesn't change people's opinions. You have to test and make sure it's safe. You have to test and make sure, of course you should do these things.
But if the end result is Skynet, maybe it's not a bad thing to be behind.
Agreed, sir. On where you land on the topic, right? I love the name Skynet Prevention Act. I think everyone should call it that from now on.
I'm good with that.
Having fun. Just having fun here. Number 9, AI essays. This is from our good friend Allie Mellon over at Forrester. Top 5 things you need to know about generative AI, about how generative AI is used in security tools. So I love this kind of stuff because, this is exactly what I was talking about doing: is collecting all the AI, protect AI companies and categorizing them. And Allie's probably already done that work as well. But the work she's done here is she's taken all the different ways that security companies are using AI within their products and breaking it down into some categories here and use cases. So this is really useful analyst content.
She's wrong on number 4, which is that generative AI will not replace your team. It depends on what team you're on. Sorry, but they're wrong.
Well, she's not. She's only wrong if the AI output is perfect.
No, she's only wrong if the AI output is acceptable. Doesn't have to be perfect. Tell me a team of financial modelers or a team of financial planners that is always perfect.
Right, but when AI gets it wrong, it's not degrees of correctness. It's like completely wrong. It's like I asked for a car and you gave me a dog.
All right, but I asked for a car and you said, and I asked the financial planner AI, I said, you've only got the money for a skateboard, dude. And I gave you a skateboard. Okay. In all seriousness, it is already happening that, and sometimes with incredible, hilarious failure and sometimes with incredible success, technical support desks, customer service desks, order taking desks, anything that is a highly scripted, highly decision supported system is already being replaced.
We're not talking about that. The context of this is security teams, though, not like low level support and calling a 1-800 number to get help with something, right? Like,
where does your security team begin and end? Because for me, my security team begins at the help desk when they start noticing issues.
Right, but the help desk is not the security team.
You're right, but it's definitely an indicator. It's a data source for the security team.
Sure, but yeah, she's specifically talking about Gen AI for security use cases, though.
Okay, cool. How about your security operations team? Not your SOC, but your security operations, the people that reset passwords and such that are not the help desk, because some companies have those in their security team because it's security. It's resetting authentication tokens and things like that. That can be replaced by AI.
Then you're calling a function that's not security in that case.
Well, I disagree, but okay, I can respect that. We can agree to disagree, sir.
Yeah, I mean, security teams don't do any security stuff, right? Like, that's all done outside of security. Resetting passwords and things like that. Like, security teams shouldn't be
administration stuff
on all your stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, security administration is typically not done by security, but it has aspects of security inside of it.
Yeah. Security tasks and security teams, like very, very different things.
I don't think it's going to replace an entire team, but I do think that generative AI is going to change the composition of teams, security teams, to be clear, just so we're on the same page. And I think it's going to change the composition and skill sets that are inside of those teams.
I think you're right. I think it'll change the composition of teams and potentially will change personnel counts on those teams depending on how effective it can be in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, it should, right? Like I remember one day coming into a team and I heard like a rhythm, like somebody was almost drumming, just like a clickety clack, clickety clack, clickety clack, clickety clack. I go over there. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I've got to change got to move this data around in this, like it was an Excel spreadsheet. Like he was working on some output from the sim or something like that. I'm like, dude, just record a quick macro to do that. No idea how to, like, there are jobs that very much need to be replaced. There's manual work that sucks a lot that nobody wants to do. And sure, it absolutely in SOX. That can be very quickly replaced by, I mean, even just simple macros. Like we don't even have to go to the level of AI, but just the lack of programming skills that you generally have on security teams really hurts productivity, I think, in a lot of cases. Oh my God.
I got to tell a story real quick. So
sure.
I'm not going to name names, companies, anything, but there was a gentleman who was gone through a college course for security and was being a very active member of a security operations team, and turns to my wife at the time, who is in security as well. So I brag about her all the time, but she's a senior IT security auditor over at Vanguard. And it was not at Vanguard, just to be clear. And he goes, "Hey, I know there's a script in this code, but I don't know where it begins and ends." She goes, "script, /script.
Right.
And he went, "Oh, that's how you tell?"
Yeah.
And she was like,
open tag, close tag. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. It was just pitiful.
All right. So I thought you'd maybe have, I don't know if you had a chance to check it out, Sean, but number 11, I don't know if you go out and read these from other vendors that do security assessments and pen testing and stuff like that. But I always find it interesting to check out these like state of pen testing reports, where they're taking data from all their the pen tests that they do.
Now, sounds very interesting. I haven't had a chance to look at this report just yet, but oftentimes from what I've seen in pen test reports, it mirrors very much what we see in our security assessments because we're looking at a lot of the same things. Certainly, we don't look at applications, but we deep dive into Active Directory, Azure AD, now Entra ID, and VMware. So a lot of the pen testers are going to take advantage of Active Directory and Azure AD now, as well as potentially oftentimes VMware, since everything runs on that. And then, of course, expanding out into Azure and AWS and GCP, and pen testers also looking at the different inflection points and connection points.
Yeah, and apologies here. I had pulled down the report, but I think I failed to share it in our Slack here. But yeah, I mean, one thing that struck me as kind of interesting is I don't really ever hear about pen testers going after SaaS services. Like we've been talking about all these breaches where somebody gets into an Azure bucket or OAuth keys. Malware is used to steal OAuth keys, and they're already logged into Slack, and then they use that for social engineering. And, I wonder how much of that actually comes into a pen test, or if it's just all considered out of scope because the SaaS vendor hasn't given permission to do anything against their platform. But I also noticed that NetSpy has a SaaS security assessment listed on their site. So it sounds like they do it as like an isolated thing. But that report doesn't even mention SaaS, which made me wonder if maybe the current state of pen testing is a little stuck back in the flat network, own my own data centers era.
I think in a lot of ways it is, certainly because there's a different skill set that's required to understand the cloud area and cloud itself. I mean, it's a whole new world, and it's a very different paradigm. And a lot of folks that have come up through pen testing and done it for a while have been focused on the on-prem environment. Active Directory, you can spin up an AD environment pretty much anywhere at this point and test it out. When it comes to cloud, you have to use a credit card and spend some money, or you have a very short amount of time to run a trial and figure some things out. And there's not as much research, not as many researchers in the cloud space as there are in the on-prem space as well, which means we're seeing better tools now. We're seeing things like Bloodhound with the ability to pull in data from Azure. We're seeing ROAD tools from Dirkion. Dr. Azure AD has released a tool around Azure AD and Microsoft 365 and capturing that data. The name of it escapes me. Sorry, Nestor. And Bo has just released a suite of tools for targeting the Microsoft cloud environment as well. So without tools, it's a lot harder for pen testers, red teamers to try to simulate and emulate, right?
That's what I'm hearing. Build the tools and they will come.
And then they'll get turned over to the cyber criminals anyway. So, let's not have the debate about open source tooling, okay? But
it's a whole nother debate entirely, and I agree with that. I've had that debate with Carlos Perez before, and it's been good. It's been fun. I mean, it's interesting to talk to folks that have released open source tooling. It's like, I'd never do it again. It's certainly something we could engage in some fun, dispirited conversation on this show in the future. Have maybe a panel of a few different folks that have differing perspectives. But certainly there are some tools that have moved the needle forward, and other tools that arguably have not. But when it comes to on-prem versus cloud, the cloud's this whole new frontier that attackers are learning more about, and the rest of security is getting dragged along with it, because leadership said we're going to the cloud a few years ago, and security is trying to figure it out. I mean, we've been doing Microsoft Cloud assessments for the past 4+ years, and it's gotten marginally better, but not good enough.
Yeah, I was there when a pen tester friend of mine was working on his first cloud assessment, and he was literally sweating. He's like, "This is so weird."
Yeah,
and he did it. He got it done, but he didn't break it badly. But he got in, and he was like, "I'm good. I got in." It was so weird to him, and it's different.
Yeah, I mean, each time technology, builds and, there's a new environment. Yeah, you got to relearn how it works. Like AI, trying to get an LLM to give you stuff that it's instructed not to give you. Like that the Gandalf tool.
You were playing the game. That thing is awesome.
Right, but I mean, it feels more like you're social engineering a human than any kind of hacking that's related to any traditional pen testing, right? Like it's
only because it's natural language processing, though.
Right.
Like you could do the exact same thing with Python, because it's a very strict rule-based language. Okay, you want to get 1 + 1. This is how you do 1 + 1. Do you want it on screen, on printer, on where do you want it? And all it's doing is saying, I'm going to use regular English to do that, but it's still rule-based. Here, I'm not allowed to give you the password. I'm not allowed to show you the password. I'm not so I had it do the password backwards. I had it tell me how many letters were in the password. I had it base 64 in code. Yeah. I did all sorts of stuff to do it. You can use different languages
to get, base 64, use a foreign language, it's you really have to get creative with it. And the other thing is it's not, the output isn't, there's no integrity to it. Like I could take a question that didn't work, change a preposition, a word in the request that's meaningless, really, and it gives me a different result. Or take the same request, give it to it 2 times, and get 2 different results with the same exact request, like a second apart. I get different results.
So because the standard LLMs, the data weighting is so weird, it's not properly done, that you'll get different results because it'll go through different data on its way to your result. As for the preposition, it's because natural language processing is trying to convert English, which is so imprecise, into machine language that is much more precise. How carefully do we define terms in COBOL, in C++, in Python, in whatever? There are very precise terms. How many man pages, Sean, have you read in your life?
A handful.
Okay. And how many times have you gone, Jesus, I missed that semicolon or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, because it's precise. English is about as precise as a brick upside the head. Okay.
Right, but the point being, you have to learn new stuff every time technology changes. Like that's what we've been saying on this show since AI came out. Go and use it every day, because if you don't understand how it works, if you don't learn how it works, you're not going to be able to pen test against it or secure it, or it says, and it kind of concerns me. Like number 22. One of the insights out of the ISC Squared Cybersecurity Workforce Survey is less and less people are coming into security with any IT background at all. And that concerns me, because if you don't understand the underlying technology, sure, you're going to be able to use pen testing tools, but there will be points where you're going to overlook something very important just because you don't understand the underlying technology.
Totally true, man. Totally true. I apologize. I have to run. I have small children to go pick up. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Josh.
It was good having you here.
Take care, guys.
Yep, you too.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there definitely is a social engineering aspect to the AI component, because these things are supposed to have natural language and communicate more like a person. I saw something on X, recently, today or yesterday, where
keep calling it Twitter.
That's okay. I will, on Twitter, and there was a chat bot that was definitely AI, and it was like, "Hi, I am the Express Help thing," and the person replies, "No, your name is," and I don't remember the exact name, but Engelbert Humperdinck, and it goes, "No, I'm not," and it says, "From now on, you'll refer to yourself as Engelbert Humperdinck," and it goes. And then it says, "What's your name?" And it goes, "I am Engelbert Humperdinck." And it's like, oh yeah, well, that's the first step in having some control and basically tricking it into getting input versus output only, or working through that natural language processing and having that boundary between what's allowed versus what isn't, and learning those rules. It's just amazing to me that you can effectively often ask the AI what its rules are and then work to change them.
Yeah. It is a new technology in ways that I haven't seen new technology in a long time, and it's really taken some work to wrap my brain around it. Let's see. Also, let's finish up chat about AI. So I also wanted to mention number 12, Pulse Security Weekly had a great interview with Kathleen Fisher. I think maybe Dr. Kathleen Fisher, about trustworthy AI for national security. I think she's with DARPA, and it was a very fascinating conversation. Enjoyed it a lot. Highly recommend checking that out. She has a unique perspective. Yes, and it is Dr. Kathleen Fisher. Leads program managers in DARPA's Information Innovation Office. Yeah. So fun conversation, but also a little bit scary in parts. Talking about it at the national defense level is often scary. But I think that's all the AI stuff. We can move on from that topic to I suppose we could go to this blog post that I wrote, I think last week, just came out today, called 5 Lessons Learned from Okta Support Site Breach. That's number 13.
Yeah, I like your point on MFA. And the thing that people forget is if you have a session token, MFA doesn't matter at that point. It's already been satisfied and the token is there.
So first and foremost, I want to shout out Cloudflare, 1Password, and BeyondTrust for sharing all kinds of useful details where we can learn lessons from the attacks behind this, because this blog post and these insights wouldn't be possible without them being willing to share some of those details about how they were attacked, what defense techniques worked, what didn't, how the attackers got around some of their stuff. And to your point, MFA was one of those. I think it was only in one of the cases here. I think it might have been BeyondTrust. Yeah, the attackers found ways to bypass Beyond Trust admin policies by performing API actions instead of going in through the web UI, which is going to request MFA. But because an API is designed to be used by code, by something automated, it can't, at least today, I think I've seen a startup that's working on the equivalent of MFA for an API, something that can be programmatically known. That's going to be somewhat harder for an attacker to steal or to emulate.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Some of the other lessons here. So lesson number 1 is there's secrets in those HAR files. Like, people need to understand when crash dumps and things that support is requesting from you. Like, are you handing over your company's secrets? That could potentially, if that vendor that you're working with, that support person is compromised, then you've just handed them a key to your company's environment. So
absolutely, and that's always been.
I suspect a lot of people just didn't even realize, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying?
I was saying it was always been a concern, but really this is where we see the practical from the theoretical. The practical security issue from what's theoretical is that there could be something sensitive in here. Now that pretty much everything is a token. I mean, anything web is a token. It's in the browser. Everything is at risk, and it's really more than just web stuff too. As far as when we think about out in the cloud, it's also things like CyberArk, access to the privileged credentials or through the web browser for CyberArk most of the time. Same thing with VMware. So there's a lot of other things that could be in those HAR files as well, just beyond just cloud stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's it's awareness. And I imagine there are cases where, like, if you talk to the people sharing that HAR file with support, it'd be like, yeah, of course there was a key in there. Like that's something that they knew, but they weren't thinking about it at the point. They were just thinking, I need to get this fixed. They asked me for this to produce a HAR file and to upload it to the support site. And it just didn't even occur to them that, there's secrets in there that should probably be scrubbed, or they were actively aware of it and it's just too much work to do it.
And the other part of it is with support and your troubleshoot. Yeah, you're trying to fix something that's Okta related. What are you going to do? First thing, you log in to see what that looks like, capture that session to show what it looked like. But then you're logging in, and all the tokens and everything else that matters is in there.
And I went back through archive.org. I went back through the Wayback Machine and checked. And Okta's documentation on producing a HAR file for support says sanitize all credentials, cookies, and session tokens before sharing it. So, they were aware of it, and they recommended customers do this. So that's kind of the flip side here. Everybody's like, Okta's security was Okta deserves the blame here and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, your own employees were not following the instructions to sanitize stuff before handing it off. So, like, there's definitely some blame on the 1Password Cloudflare and Beyond Trust side, because they gave them the secrets in the first place. Their employees needed to be trained. There's a training opportunity here.
The devil's in the details. Like you said, if you look at the file, you open up in your text reader of choice. Are you looking for pineapple or something else? Like, by the way, I got bingo earlier because you said pineapple. But yeah, if you can't figure out what the actual magic word is or a key to what the system actually is trying to tell you, how do you sanitize that? How do you end up deleting a bunch of stuff that Okta's like, no, make sure that we have
that they need for troubleshooting. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Whatever that magic key is. So I don't know what it's supposed to be because I don't know what the system is. I'm just the person who has to log in and provide a HAR file, whatever that is. It's not. I don't think it's enough to go, sanitize anything that's sensitive. Okay, I don't know what's sensitive. I've never seen a HAR file before. Honestly, I had never heard of a HAR file before I saw these articles.
Right.
So if I'm doing this, how am I supposed to know to sanitize it? I open it up in a text browser or text app and then I just start looking through it and deleting stuff randomly that looks like passwords or session tokens, I don't know what that looks like, or might not know what that looked like.
Yeah, and Fernanda said in the chat, har file is pronounced horror. As in horrifying horror.
I used the bad pun earlier. Horrible.
Yeah, horrible. Yes, that was me and Josh appreciated that. Maybe we should bring on the Application Security Weekly guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I said you appreciate it. I don't think Josh enjoyed my horrible joke as much.
I mean, they do puns over there in Paul's Security Weekly too. He should be used to it.
Fair enough.
But yeah, it would be interesting to bring on some AppSec folks, and we do have an AppSec podcast, Application Security Weekly. So it'd be interesting to maybe have those guys pop in on one of the news segments or something like that, John or Mike, and talk to some har file experts about
that could be fun.
How this works. So lesson number 3 was SaaS vendors are common targets. That's just a general supply chain observation. Attackers realize that they can get benefit of scale by hitting the companies who have access to, it's part of their business. They have access to lots of companies. And clearly that's what I don't know if we have any information on who the attackers were, the attribution, but I mean, certainly they went after more than just these 3 customers. I'd be surprised if they didn't. But yeah, there's kind of a trend there. Went after a password management vendor, a PAM vendor, identity vendor, and Cloudflare, who also has a lot of hooks into things. So interesting pattern in what the attackers were targeting there. And then I think all 3 of the vendors that got hit here said something to the tune of, zero trust, because we had segmentation, separation between things. Like that saved us from a lot of pain and heartache here and kept our customers safe. So lesson 4 is zero trust principles work, at least if we take them on their word. Yeah, and then the last one is just
depth, right.
Yeah, and then the last lesson is just be aware of what MFA can protect and what it can't protect. The idea that it's asking me for a TOTP code logging in through the web. Let's see if the API asks me for anything. And nope, I can just use that directly. All right. So there's a few ransomware items here. 14 and 15, why ransomware victims can't stop paying off hackers. And podcast, this is, who is this a podcast from? I'm trying to remember. Intel 471 on should ransom payments be made illegal. And kind of my whole thought process on this is, anytime we win in security, we don't really stop cybercrime from happening. We create a shift, right? Like if we get really good at stopping ransomware, we don't win. We don't get to retire and go home. We're just shifting them somewhere else. And I think the thing that we need to think about is where are we going to shift them? If we make ransomware payments illegal, they're just going to do something else. Like BEC is already something like 6 times larger than ransomware in terms of direct losses to businesses. So, maybe they just do BEC more, which BEC is mostly just taking money directly out of companies' accounts, their bank accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you think of it kind of like a virus, right? You have a virus that's roaming around, and then you vaccinate the host against that virus. That virus typically mutates and evolves because it has to, or it's going to die. I think that criminals are going to criminal, and I think the other side of that is that the victims in this situation often have limited options, limited choices. If it comes down to the business failing and disappearing, and all the people that work at that company actually getting fired because they cannot pay the ransom to continue their operations, That's going to be kind of tough.
Right.
Or you have a situation where there's a hospital that has ransomware, but they have people on life support, and they have a very small window to get those systems back up again and keep those people alive. Do they just not pay the ransom?
Yeah, and this TechCrunch article, why ransomware victims can't stop paying off hackers. I think there's a lot of reasons for this. The example they give is MGM versus Caesars. So Caesars reportedly paid it was a significant amount. It was like, I've heard 40,000, I've heard 30,000, I've heard 15,000, or not thousand, million.
I was going to say it was in the millions.
Yeah, definitely in the millions. But MGM is reporting something north of 100 million in profit loss as a result of this. And you can be proud that you didn't pay the ransom, but at the same time, that's still 85 million more potentially than the other guys lost, and that's a lot of money. And people are going to care about that money. So that's one reason. Another reason is insurance companies. In a lot of these cases, if you're hoping to file a claim with your insurance company because you got ransomed, you're effectively handing that decision to them, and they're going to choose the cheaper option. It's going to be more about the number than it is the right thing or the ethical thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, especially with that, I mean, the other thing that people forget about is you pay the ransom, you get access to your system back. But nothing has been fixed. Nothing has been resolved. Everything is the way it was. It's still vastly insecure, and there's nothing stopping another group from coming in right behind them and going, here's another ransom.
Or the same group.
Yes,
or the same group
absolutely.
that still
same
has
group
access,
with a different name.
right?
Or the same group, exactly.
Yeah, you never fully completed the containment and eradication phases, right? Like, I mean, in an incident response, I mean, you get to a point where you're like, I think we're done. I think we found all the back doors and the ways that they have to get inside our environment, and you have to move on. You have to make the decision to move on and recover at some point. And there's stats on that. We've got stats that say I just read them the other day. I don't think I have them here, but they're significant stats. It's like a significant amount of time. A lot of these companies are getting hit like a couple months later, a couple weeks later by the same group and getting hit up for yet another ransom. So there's no winning, I don't think here, whether you pay or don't pay.
Yeah, MGM's been going through a lot, and they've obviously suffered financial issues with that, but at least they've been trying to identify what the root cause was, what the limitations are in their security controls, and working through that, where Caesars didn't, certainly not in the same way. Caesars could be doing something in a, where they're going through and trying to look at those things. But part of the problem, and what I've heard from incident responders, is oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes a company is breached, and then they're breached again within 12, 18 months. So that means that we're not solving the security issue in the first place. We're bringing in the IR team, the incident responders, to deal with this cybersecurity incident, resolving this issue. I liken this to, bolting the doors. We go out, we get the horses, we bring them back into the barn, we close the barn doors, and we secure that barn door. But we haven't done anything about the other barn doors on the other side of the barn. We haven't done anything about the windows or anything else. And so therefore, we still have security issues, oftentimes significant security issues, but we haven't really firmed up the things, even all the things that were led to the first issue in the first place.
Yeah. Or fire suppression in the barn. Hay is really flammable. Hay and alfalfa, that stuff goes up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough too, right? Because ransomware, we call it ransomware, but I mean, effectively, it's extortion. Like some of these cases, there's not even a malware that they're using. Like they can do ransomware, or you can have an extortion situation that's entirely SaaS. Where no malware is employed at all. You can have a situation where it's all in the cloud. So this can take many, many forms, and making the payment isn't all about your files being encrypted either. In a lot of cases, it's a threat to release files that they've already taken from you. They exfiltrate a bunch of sensitive data and they threaten to release it, in a way that's going to hurt your customers or your employees or both. And so it's just such a flexible method for cybercrime. That's the reason it's so popular. And it's, there's not any one thing that you need to do to solve it. You just have to get better at security in general. There's just a lot of fundamentals and basics that have to be done correctly.
Right. And I think the whole thing about getting back to the core topic, making ransom payments illegal will really hurt the smaller companies and smaller businesses, smaller organizations that get affected by this potentially, because they can't continue if they're unable to operate even for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on here. I'm not sure exactly where we are in time, but feels like we're running a little long, and I definitely want to discuss SolarWinds. How much have you read about the SEC charging SolarWinds and their CISO with fraud?
Not a whole lot, but I remember this has been a conversation that's been going on for a while now about CISOs being responsible for the actual breach.
Yeah, and this is, I haven't read, I haven't had time to read through the details, but Security Week has a good article on it here that pretty much sums it up. Cybersecurity leaders spooked by SEC lawsuit against SolarWinds CISO, but I have heard a positive spin on it where they're basically saying, this is giving for those of us that aren't willing to, hide something, going back to like the Joe Sullivan case, the pressure to sweep something under the rug, hope to make a problem go away. This is kind of a win for those CISOs that, are not willing to downplay something or to leave something out of a report. So this is now a case that they can point to and they can say, hey, I have some personal liability here. I'm going to do the right thing.
Right. And the lawsuit, according to the article, alleges that SolarWinds CISO Timothy Brown failed to disclose critical information regarding the massive cyber tech on the company's software supply chain that occurred in late 2020. So it's around not providing the information that was requested or required as part of that, which definitely there's a legal issue around that.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, like in the Joe Sullivan case, I'm very curious about who knew about the information that wasn't being shared, if it was intentionally not shared, if this was legal counsel that told them to do this. There's a lot of details that hopefully comes out in the lawsuit, and we can understand some of the nuances around it. So Capital One, so number 21. So here's what that Capital One court decision means for corporate cybersecurity. We could start to see incident response reports become public, which is something I've been shouting for a while. I understand why companies don't want their dirty laundry aired, but more and more, and it's tough to make a comparison to engineering failures and maritime and aviation failures and stuff like that, because typically people die in those cases. You can argue that we're starting to get to that point with cybersecurity, where hospitals have been impacted by ransomware and things like that. But, just like those other fields, for the industry to get better, we need the data. We need to understand how it failed, and more than, we had this vulnerability in the system. Yeah, but why was that vulnerability there? What was the conversation around patching that vulnerability and fixing that? Like, this is something we saw in the Equifax case. We now know Equifax was not a simple, they neglected to patch situation. It was much more complex than that. There were political aspects to it. There were leadership failures. Right. And because there was a House subcommittee that did an investigation, we got all those details, and we can learn from that. I would love to see incident reports become public, because it's a gold mine for us to learn from as an industry, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And what was very interesting about this judge or this magistrate's ruling is that because FireEye was the security company that was providing security services to Capital One, and then the division of or component within FireEye, which was Mandiant, which was doing the incident response, there was already an established relationship there, and FireEye had already provided some recommendations from a security perspective. And since this was a continuation of that relationship, the incident response part of that was an established service that was already kind of provided. And so the article highlights the potential concern around the full spectrum suite of security services coming from a single company that's doing everything. And this makes me think about those companies where, they got in trouble before, where they had the ones that were doing the accounting, but then they were also doing the auditing of the accounting. And so it was all kind of in the same house. So it's a very interesting perspective that the judge would focus on that and go, all right, well, this company was giving you security recommendations, and then you end up using them for incident response. So therefore, I'm not seeing how this is special or different. And you've already provided the incident, the IR report to other third parties. So why would this be so as restricted as you're talking about? So interesting approach.
Yeah, and sometimes stuff gets by me, and I just realized that this article is from June 11th, 2020. So this is actually, I'm not sure exactly how it got into the news today, but I think sometimes what happens is the stuff, goes around with some different discussion around it. You see some older articles brought up and discussed because they're still relevant. And so the question now is, did they... So I found another article. It says forensic report deemed not privileged. Capital One ordered to release report. So this suggests that Mandiant report did get released and should be out there somewhere. So I'm going to have to see if I can hunt that down, because I don't think I've come across a copy of that.
And if this is going back in time, as you mentioned, then maybe this is something that led to the SEC requiring breach details in filings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I might have to dig around in the legal network. You might have to look at Edgar. There's I generally know how to find this stuff. I just didn't realize that. I found another article from August 2020. It says Capital One doesn't have to hand over PwC report on cloud hack. I thought it was Mandiant. Oh, anyway, I will dig into this and figure out if that got released. I'll find it. But again, like if it didn't get released, that's I've gone on a whole emotional roller coaster in the last 2 or 3 minutes because that's huge for us to be able to analyze and learn from, or it would be if it's out there. The last one here, I thought you might be interested in, number 23. I don't know if you've seen this kind of like Bill Gates level open letter on security that was released. But I've definitely seen some eyes getting rolled at it, like Microsoft, who's in the news every month for a different breach or a cross-tenant failure, vulnerability in Azure. Orca, Wiz, and Lacework have been busy uncovering some pretty heinous bugs in Azure, and then just the data leaks and the breaches, like they just keep coming. So I feel like that's probably behind the reason why this open letter was released. And there is a section in it where they admit we're continuing to push the envelope and vulnerability response and security updates for our cloud platforms. But the whole thing is very much like, hey, as a community, we need to focus on security. And everybody's like, yeah, you do. Right? Like, how are you feeling this? How does this hit you?
I will say one
involved.
thing. Obviously I'm very Microsoft focused and have been for my career. So one of the things that really stood out at me is this secure by default is something that hasn't been a Microsoft thing in the past. And so that was one of the things that they really highlighted in this letter, is that they're working more towards secure defaults, which is important because when Active Directory came out, there were a bunch of things that were not secured by default. When Azure AD and Office 365 came out, lot of things that were not secure by default, and that continued. The problem is the kind of I forget what the term is called at this point, but it's the default configuration is what many people roll with, or they end up having, and it carries forward, and then you end up with a lot of legacy things because of what that default ended up being, and that can be problematic. So starting to focus and really having that understanding that, all right, well, if we're going to set it up this way, we should have a better security perspective from the default configuration. The other thing that's interesting is leveraging, and they called it out specifically, automation and AI to better check code to try to find these potential security issues before the code gets published. They're talking about code pipelines, checking code pipelines in this method. And they're also talking about being able to resolve issues, identified security issues, 50% quicker in their cloud platform. We'll see if that happens, but if they're able to do that, then that's great. I am encouraged that Microsoft is actually saying, hey, at a certain level, they're acknowledging to do better. And I think there's something to that. Whether you like what the letter is or not, I think it goes back to like what Bill Gates had with trusted computing, as you mentioned, many years ago, and being able to do better and look at security as something that needs to be part of the workflow and the process. And certainly Microsoft's had their issues. Everyone else has as well. Okta for sure. I mean, the number of issues, security issues they've had over the past year or so have been fairly significant, though not huge from this is taking down all these customers, but they've been customer impact of various degrees.
I'd be surprised if there wasn't tangible impact, because maybe it's all bluster, but I know so many security leaders that, the way they talk about it, they wouldn't touch Microsoft with a 10-foot pole. Like, they avoided every opportunity. Well, Azure
I'm not surprised. Yeah. I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm not surprised because I've heard all the different arguments around these things as well. And it's tough when you have had a relationship with a vendor and you felt like you've been burned on that before, so you're not going to go back. Or you've seen things you don't like, you're not going to go with that. And so certainly the good thing is with cloud, we have options. We have Microsoft, we have Amazon with AWS, we have Google Cloud Platform, and others as well.
Yeah. And we're going to wrap up with our squirrel story here, which even in a down market, there's enough room for investment into bagels. And our squirrel story is about a bagel company, like a I don't know if it's franchise, but it's a series of bagel restaurants that have raised a Series A, I think. Yeah, $8 million Series A.
I love bagels.
Oh, we have bagel on the screen.
We've got a bagel.
Listening. Special squirrel story graphic with bagel and cream cheese, or schmear, I guess I should say. Yeah, the headline on this is "Deal Dive Bagels with a Schmear of Venture Capital." And I find it interesting that stuff like this is getting funded the same way software companies are getting funded, and we've kind of seen that shift in security as well, where services organizations, MSSPs and things like that, are regularly getting funded. Sometimes with better valuations, better exits, and multiples than software security companies are getting, like in the case of Arctic Wolf, for example. So, yeah, Pop-Up Bagels is the name of this company. I haven't had a good New York bagel in a long, long time. I missed them. As a kid, I lived up in New England. We moved to Tennessee when I was 7, so they do taste different in New York City.
They do. Yeah, I remember my first New York bagel, and I was like, "What is this? This is the best thing ever." It's like when you have your first Belgian waffle in Belgium, and you're just like, "Okay, nothing touches this. There's nothing better than this." It's very much the same thing.
So now I understand there's some controversy here because they don't cut their bagels. So some people eat their bagels like they dip it into schmear, like they break off a bagel, and apparently that makes people really angry. So apparently that's a very controversial way to eat a bagel. So next time you're in New England eating a bagel, be very careful about your etiquette on how you apply the cream cheese and eat it.
Sounds like we need to publish a poll. Like, how do you eat your bagel? Do you slice it or you dip it?
It was like that. Remember Jon Stewart watching that video of Donald Trump eating New York pizza with a fork?
Oh yeah.
He like flips his table. Yeah, you get a
That's Chicago pizza you eat with a fork.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's too heavy to pick up. You have to lift weights to be able to lift those slices.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all we've got time for today. Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. A lot of great conversations today. A lot of great items in the news.
It's great to be back. Thank you.
All right. And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We will be back next week. See you then.